onboarding is one of those things where it's a gaping hole in our industry. And many companies like don't have any process for it, where they think it's super hard to bring in team members. They think it's super hard to train them. They wonder why folks are getting burned out and quitting their jobs. And they resign themselves to thinking, well, it's never going to change. And as a result, those owners and business leaders, they work themselves to death. And all of a sudden, 30 years goes by, they have no one to sell their business to, and they just close the doors. Unfortunately, that's happening a lot in our industry because we don't understand onboarding. And so I'm really excited to talk about this today. And like Eric said, or like Erica said, this is going to be totally interactive. And so please, I've got the chat open right here so I can see what you guys are saying. As I'm going through this content, listening to me for an hour will not make a difference in your business, not one bit. What's going to make a difference in your business is taking this and applying it in new situations. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of the chat feature. If you want to be brave and unmute yourself, please just ask me a question. And I would guess that Erica would be gracious enough to even help facilitate chat as comments come up. So by all means, just stop me if you want to dive into something. But this is a course that I get excited about because it is so practical. And especially right now, while businesses are just totally disrupted by the COVID-19 crisis, everybody can take advantage of this in the here and now to set themselves up for success on the back end. Because even if you've had to lay team members off, as you start to bring them back, this is the time to go through onboarding. Even if they've been a team member in the past, you can look at this as a fresh slate and say, hey, I know that we did things this way before, but now that you're back, we really want to set this out the right way. And here's how we're going to do it. Okay, so as I'm talking here, what I'd like you to do in the chat is I would like you to punch into the chat, what's the number one thing that you are hoping to get out of this class? Type that into the chat, and in just a little bit, we're going to go ahead and address that, okay? So the way that I found out about this, if you would have asked me years ago, I had no idea what the term onboarding meant. You know, I would have said, oh, this is like a weird corporate term for something, right? Like onboarding, just it didn't make sense to me. And what I realized very quickly is I was in a position to start hiring team members and manage multiple retail stores, is that when we hire somebody, they can either be hired the way that I was hired, where in the industry at most of my jobs, I've been hired, I have been put in a truck to, you know, follow Jimmy or whoever the installer is. And I kind of, through like a lot of mistakes, butcher my way into some level of competency. On the sales end, I got hired for a sales job. And I was told, well, you've been an installer, so you know the products, right? And I said, yeah, I know the products. And he said, okay, perfect. And you like talking to people? I said, yeah, you know, I get along with talking to people. And they said, okay, awesome. Well, you're going to be a salesperson. And that was basically my training, right? Like just go on the floor, just talk about the products. Yeah, you should ask some questions, but there was no direction. There was no expectation that was set. And so what has happened to me, and I know that you guys can probably resonate with this. There have been so many times in my life where I have faced burnout and frustration in a job because I didn't know what was expected of me and I wasn't given the tools to succeed. And ultimately, that's what onboarding is. And so what I found personally, like as I'm unveiling this class for you, this is based on my last 15 years in the industry. The first 7 to 8 years of it was on me being an employee where I was hired and I had very little onboarding. And so I developed bad habits. There was all kinds of friction between me and my boss at different times, just because they had an expectation of me that I didn't understand. I had expectations of them that they didn't understand. And it was a bad situation. And over the last 7 to 8 years, as I've been in a role where I'm now hiring people, I've realized that the way that we onboard makes all the difference in the world. And that it is possible to build a system of onboarding. It doesn't guarantee success, but man, it gives you a leg up on it. And the beauty is that you're not going to Oh, hey guys, are you able to hear me?
Yep, now we can. Sorry.
Was that on my end?
I think so.
Huh. Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. Here, just one second. get back here to pull up the chat window.
Yeah, we do
Sorry
have
about
a
that,
few
guys.
chats, so yep. I didn't know if you wanted me to read them to you while they were coming in or what, how you wanted to handle that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read those for me, and we'll jump into that.
Okay, so Ben Holt is asking meaningful questions during the interview process. That's what he wants to know a little more about. Justin Gilbert says, we don't have a true onboarding process. Currently, I want to invest into our employees' future as well as the future of our business. Typically, our new hires are apprentices of our field foreman.
Yep.
Is that because of the Michigan state licensing law, Justin? Just a quick question. And then Caroline, she's excited to hear how this applies to bringing team members back after being away during COVID-19, in addition
Yeah.
to new team members. So looking forward to
Cool.
the system. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I'm really excited to show you guys this, and I think this is going to be really fun. So to tell you just a story, I don't want to fill this with stories about me, but what I do want to provide you is context, that everything I'm talking about is not theory. These are real practices that I've used, and frankly, it's been because of successes and failures I've had that we've been able to come up with this system. So as we lay out the groundwork for today, we're really going to go through 4 different things. Part 1 is going to be why onboarding matters. We are going to beat this into the ground because onboarding is really easy to ignore, and we want to be radically intentional with this. So we're going to talk about why it matters. After that, we're going to discuss 4 rules of onboarding that you have to understand. Once you understand those 4 rules, part 3 in this course is that we have to nail our first 90 days. And lastly, I'm going to give you the ultimate day 1 blueprint. And this is going to be something that I have used every time I've got a new hire, and it's the way that day 1 shapes out. So I want to get to these questions because they're super important. You know, Ben asked about meaningful questions in the interview, and that's actually not something that's covered in this course, but we can absolutely get in and talk about it because the interview is really important. And I guess before it even comes to onboarding a team member, you need to hire them. And there's some things that I've looked at in my time that have been important. And one thing that I've realized is, this is going to sound bad, but the hires I've made that have amazing industry experience have actually been some of the most difficult people and situations that I've ended up with. And most of them were not bad people at all. But the truth was that because they had 10 or 20 or 30 years of industry experience, it was very hard for them to move into a system where things were done differently, especially if the companies that they'd come from didn't have a lot of systems and processes and they were kind of run like the Wild West. It was very difficult, not impossible, but it was difficult to move them into a new system. Where hiring new people that had no industry experience, yeah, you're starting from ground zero when it comes to what they know contextually to our space, but you don't have habits, you don't have ruts that have been ingrained. And so in the interview process, I would think really hard about the type of person you're looking to hire and what the position is. I'm a big fan of a lot of interviews. I would say to hire slow and fire fast. So I've had team members get upset at me before because of how many interviews I will conduct to hire somebody. And there have been positions that have been not filled for a long time because of that. But I believe that if you hire slow, you know, I would say at least 4 to 5 job interviews with different people in different situations to really start to understand who is this person, what's their character. And then in that first 90 days, make it probationary to where you can fire very quickly if it's not the right fit. When it comes to interviewing, I am a huge fan of character over competency. So I believe that you can train competency very easily. You know, I myself have had team members that don't know the difference between a gas insert and a zero clearance fireplace. They don't know anything about fireplaces, that have been hired in September. They spend September and half of November training. And then in December, they sell $60,000 worth of retail products. In January, they sell $80,000 worth of retail products. That's a very quick turnaround, right? Considering that they basically had 6 weeks of training and then they're on the sales floor. It's absolutely possible if you can onboard them the right way, and that's coming with no industry experience. Likewise, I have friends who have been in an installation management position where they have hired installers as helpers under a lead, where 8 weeks later, that helper is a full-blown lead. So it does take time to fill out all the nuances of the specific industry knowledge that we have. But if you can hire for character and you have an intentional onboarding system, then you're going to set yourself up for success. And while it might take 2 years for someone to truly become like the proficient expert of what they do, in a short amount of time, they can get to the point where their competency is enough for the work that's being required of them. And I know that that's kind of an end around to the question, Ben, but I believe in the interview process, lots of open-ended questions. I would ask lots of questions about, don't ask like, what are your weaknesses necessarily? Ask about, if I were to ask your last supervisor, what would they say your weaknesses are? If I was to talk to team members you've worked with in the past, how would they say that you've treated them? Give me an example of a situation where you did this. So I would put them in situations where they need to problem solve live, framing the question as, instead of what are your weaknesses, what would you say your last supervisor would say your weaknesses are? That changes the way they answer the question, and it actually implies that you might call their last supervisor later in the interview. You could say, that's amazing. Could I have a reference of that last supervisor? I'd love to talk to them about their experiences with you. So we can talk more about that offline, but I will say, in the interview process, your goal is to determine, does this person have the character of what I'm looking for? And competency, I'll never turn down. And that's where, like, I'm not totally against industry experience, but just laying my cards on the table in many of the situations I've had when industry experience comes, it's not that they're a bad person at all, but they are not used to working within a business that has systems and processes. And so there is difficulty there. And actually, for me, give you an example talking about onboarding. So for me, a number of years ago, I had some industry experience and I got brought into a new job. And I had been used to operating in the Wild West. We had no systems. We had no processes. I could do whatever I wanted. I would order the stove. I would take it off the truck. I could call the customer and it was ready, all these different things. And all of a sudden, I'm in a situation now where we have departments that do these sorts of things. We have other team members that have responsibilities, that there is a system and a process to the way this is done. And I'll tell you, for me, it took me 2 years in this company to really start to feel like I have an understanding of how the company works, where I can start to use the company as an extension of myself. And the reason why is because I was never onboarded. I was never taught this is how the company works. And so if you are going to have someone that has industry experience like I did, you will set them and your business up for success by onboarding this way. Okay, so with that, I want to jump into why onboarding matters. This is something that is so important. And like I said, if you have anything in the chat that you want to talk about, Erica's going to flag me down. But basically, onboarding is one of the most important things that you can do. And there's a few reasons why. So number one, this initial time is going to mold impressions into your team members that are never going to be undone. A former boss that I used to have had this amazing analogy. And he basically said, Tim, you are like a block of clay, and my goal is to hone you into an amazing bowl or a pot or a statue, or whatever you're making out of the clay. And that's a very fitting analogy, because when you're onboarding a team member, they have a fresh look at your company. They probably think in many ways your company is better than it is, right? They're looking for opportunity. They're hoping that this works out. And you really have about 6 months of a honeymoon period to really mold this person into the team member that you want. And there's going to be a point where that clay hardens. Once that clay hardens, there's nothing you can do to change it, right? Like, only God can change it at that point. You're done. Like, the way that you've shaped them and molded them is fixed. So you want to be really intentional to, how did I mold them? And it's amazing how, as you get into companies, there's team members that have been there for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. They're so bitter and they resent the company. And because they've been molded that way, they were from the beginning, they can give you every reason in the world why, it's never been this way. I used to work at this place and they always did this, but now that I'm here, the owners don't appreciate me. They set me up to lose. Eventually that becomes a mold where that person is like, for better or for worse, they're stuck. And so as a leader, that's really hard to have a team member that way. And you can avoid that if you can mold them initially the right way. So realize that this initial time is super important. And what I'll tell you is, the company that I used to work for, Fireside Home Solutions, has an unbelievable owner named John Waterstrat. And there are team members that have been at Fireside for 20 years that have worked with John this whole time, to where because John molded them into a team member that loved the company, they felt like the company had invested in them. They felt like John was someone who really cared about them. He put in that legwork during those initial few months and years, to where now these team members would take a bullet for him. If someone says something about John Waterstrat, you're going to have a fight on your hands, because these team members believe in him, which means they'll give him the benefit of the doubt if things start to go sideways. The reason why is because that initial investment was made. So if you can do this right, you're also going to buy yourself a time machine. And this is what I mean by that. So for me, when I first got into a leadership position where I was hiring people, the first few hires that I made were very time intensive, because I had no intentionality. I knew that they'd be starting on whatever day, Monday. And so I'd wake up on Monday morning and be like, oh yeah, they're starting today. Oh, okay, what should we do? Well, I guess we should do this, and we should do this. And, you know, I'd ruin my day trying to figure out, like, what do we teach them? And we kind of figure out the day, and then we get to day 2, and I would go through part of it, and I'd give them something to do, and they'd come back and be like, I'm done. And I would go, okay, stop what I'm doing. Okay, I guess we'll do this. And it was terrible. And I made all kinds of mistakes because I wasn't being intentional with the onboarding process. What's happened is, as I've been able to think more strategically and actually build a system of onboarding, it's made it to where when someone gets hired, I don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Like, I've got a form set up of how their first 30 days of training is going to go. And I can make some tweaks on it, like the week before they start. But when that team member begins, we've got the agenda, we've got the playbook, and it allows me to delegate responsibilities of the onboarding to different team members within the company. And it literally buys me a time machine. You know, everybody here knows when you bring on a new hire, how much work it is. And while you do want to be intentional, and if someone is going to be working on my team as a direct report, you bet in that initial period, I'm going to spend a lot of time with them, but I'm not reinventing the wheel. I have the ability to delegate as I see fit, and I'm able to get way more done than I ever was before. If that makes sense, I want you guys to type yes into the chat, okay? This will buy yourself a time machine. And that's the last part too, is that if you build it now, you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. Awesome. Yep. Justin gets it. He says yes. Ben says yes. Guys, it's the truth that we can build that time machine and set ourselves up for success. And the cool thing is that what I'm going to show you today is a system that I've used to train salespeople. But this same framework applies to service techs, it applies to installers, it applies to office staff. And the beauty is, you know, if you build this system for whoever your next hire is, you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel next time. So if you script out the first 30 days or the first 90 days of what the training process looks like for a salesperson, when an installer goes to get hired, you've got the framework built. So you can go in and tweak different things for, okay, this applies to sales. We're going to do this on this day for installation instead. We're going to do this on this day because they're an office staff position instead. But the model's built. Gary Keller, the CEO of Keller Williams Realty, he talks about the fact that what we need in life are models. People who can build models will change the world, because if somebody has a proven model that they can give me, I don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Like, I'm already standing on the shoulders of giants, and I can go out and apply it. And sure, as I go down the road, I can tweak that model and make it even better. But if I operate without a model, I'm way down at the bottom, and I could spend my entire life just to get back to the point that the person with the model had. So let's use the models that are in front of us of onboarding, and we can tweak it based on the position as we go down the path. But I'm telling you, if you build it now, it's going to be hard work up front, but you will do so much damage on the back end with this. The other thing with onboarding is that most companies don't take it seriously. And I want you to put in the chat, I want you to put an exclamation point if you have ever worked for a company that did not take onboarding seriously and it created a difficult situation for you. Okay, I want you to put in an exclamation point into the chat if that's the case. Okay, Ben's got a lot of exclamation points. He's been in that situation before. And guys, we all relate to this, okay? So when your company doesn't take onboarding seriously, there's a few things that happen. So number one, new team members feel totally overwhelmed and totally confused. So sometimes we psych ourselves out of how complex our industry is because we tell ourselves, oh, it's so complicated. Oh, it's so confusing. You know, no one can figure it out. It takes all this time. And honestly, like every industry is that way. Like if I got hired at McDonald's right now and I came in totally blind, there'd be things I don't know how to do. I mean, every industry has got specific knowledge. Every industry is complex. We get it. But the truth is, like, you figured it out. There's other people that have figured it out, and we can do the same thing for our new hires. So if you don't take onboarding seriously, you have team members that fight burnout and frustration because they're looking around, they're totally confused, right? Like I remember a job I got hired for in the industry where all of a sudden I'm being pulled into the field to install, and I'm being told about, inserts and zero clearance fireplaces, and there's just terminology of like vent pipe and tools that I don't know what they are. I've never used this stuff before. It's totally confusing, totally overwhelming. And bullet point number 2 is, as a result of that, companies waste thousands of dollars in retraining, like thousands and thousands of dollars in retraining. I'm not going to ask you guys to type into the chat, but I would imagine that all of you have team members that should know how to do things, that you're frustrated because it feels like they don't. You've been here for 5 years. Come on, you should know how to do this. You've been a service tech now for a year and a half. You should understand how to do this. You've been on the sales floor for this long. You should know how to do it. And so you spend thousands and thousands of dollars retraining that person. Whereas if you would have taken your onboarding seriously from the beginning and built a system and a process to do this, where you intentionally covered it and you set up expectations and you held them accountable, you're not going to waste that money in retraining. There's nothing worse than that. It creates a revolving door at certain positions too. I'd imagine in most of our companies, there's a certain position that it just seems like no one can stick with. Whatever it is, whether it's in the accounting department, on the sales floor, in the installation end, or as an office staff person, there's a revolving door. In most cases where there's a revolving door, it's because there's not an onboarding process. So the people that come in, they're confused, they're frustrated, they're totally overwhelmed, they feel like they're set up to lose, and as a result, they leave because they're burned out. They feel like this company's crazy, right? And that goes on to the next thing, is that when you don't take onboarding seriously, it gives team members a terrible impression of your company and of your leadership. So again, when someone gets hired onto your company, they believe that your company can help them win. That's the reason that they're taking the job. To some degree, they believe your company can help them win. And it's up to you to either prove that or disprove it. So if onboarding is not done intentionally, say you hire somebody into a sales role. Day one, you put them on the sales floor next to Sally. And Sally just starts telling them about like, oh yeah, I've worked here for so long, and they mean well when they say these things to you, but like we don't have any type of process, and so you just kind of got to figure it out and just do this stuff yourself. Like I've been in situations like that, and that makes you think, like, you're like, wait, I thought I was hired to like a company that understood what they were doing, and that starts to plant seeds of doubt of like, does this company actually like do things right? Do they even have good leadership? Do they know what they're doing? That plants seeds of doubt. And it goes back to the way that Sally was molded, right? Like if she's a hard block of clay that's been molded in the wrong direction, and your onboarding is you just go have a team member sit next to her, what kind of habits do you think that team member is going to develop, right? Like it's going to be really, really difficult to work with them. Lastly, lack of onboarding produces people with bad habits, period, plain and simple. If you have people with bad habits, most likely the reason is because they weren't trained properly and you're not holding them accountable to the expectations that you set. I found this to be true myself. There have been so many situations I've had where I'm in a situation with I'm frustrated at a team member. I'm like, why are they doing this? Why do they have this bad habit? And I got to point the finger at myself and say, well, Tim, it's because you never set the expectation of what you wanted. You never gave them the tools to succeed. So is it any surprise that they've developed a bad habit? They're fending for themselves, doing the best that they know how, and they chose the wrong thing, right? That's a failure on leadership. Now, leadership needs to set the expectation from there and hold accountable to it. And if the team member can't rise to the occasion, then they need to find something else to do with their job. But it is the leader's fault for those bad habits. And the leader's got to address it and ultimately do the team member the favor of coaching them through it or of helping them find another job. Okay, as we go on here, effective onboarding saves you time and makes you a ton of money, okay? This is really the case. If you look who said that, it was common sense. We all know this. We know that onboarding saves us time, that if we understand what we're doing intentionally with a team member, it will save us time. And I'm telling you that it's going to make you money. So a while back, I was talking with a West Coast company, right? It's not a company on this call. And they were asking questions about how their business needed to operate in regards to in-home sales. So we're going through tactics of selling in the home. And they asked me, they said, we've got this team member, we kind of brought them on to be our sales manager, and we really thought they'd be able to get into the home by now, but we're actually still having to send the owner of our company out because this team member doesn't know how to do it. We're just kind of slowly trying to bring them on board. And I was like, oh, okay. How long have they been with your company for? 2 years. This team member had been there for 2 years in a position where the expectation was that they'd be able to go out to a house and close a sale, and they weren't able to yet. So that tells me right there, like, we have a big disconnect. That's a lot of time to pay somebody to not be able to go out to any in-home visits. And so as we talked about this, like, a lot of it goes back to the fact there wasn't an effective onboarding process. There wasn't a checklist of this is what we train here, this is what we train here, this is where we measure for accountability to make sure they've got competency, and now they're going to be going into the home. Instead, it was just kind of, well, yeah, just shadow me for a little bit, shadow them, and yeah, when you feel like you're ready, we'll just jump you in. But the truth is that, like, no one rises to the occasion there. And so onboarding is going to save you time. It's going to make you money. Just like I mentioned, this team member that I had that was hired in September, and in December, $60,000 in sales. In January, $80,000 in retail sales. Like, it's pretty awesome for somebody that was just recently hired. So that was able to make me money and also set them up for success in the industry. So it's an absolute win-win. Okay, so if we're going to talk about the 4 rules of onboarding, what I'd like you guys to do is, as I'm saying this, I would like you to write into the chat one thing that resonates with you about the 4 rules of onboarding, okay? So when it comes to onboarding, the 4 rules are this. So number 1, be intentional. Be intentional. And it's amazing, if you guys are fans of Stephen Covey, he's got this amazing book that's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he has 7 habits. And habit number 1 is be proactive. Don't be reactive, be proactive. That requires intentionality. And it's remarkable how doing things on purpose sets you apart from everybody else. I'll give you an example, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit. So I've got my iPad right here, and I've got a couple documents on the iPad. And I want to show you, so I can send this out afterwards. But Ben asked the question about the interview. So one of the things that I have in an interview and that I also have on a team member's first day is I've got a job profile. I'll put this up to the screen and then I'll read it to you, right? So the job profile looks something like this. It's got all these different categories. It's got all these different bullet points. And the job profile is expectations of what the job requires. And I would recommend for every position in your company, every position, create a written job profile. And as people come back to work, go over it with those team members. Because I'll tell you, especially if you've got millennials working for you, it's true for everybody, but especially for millennials, your team members want to be held accountable. They absolutely want to. And the reason why is that they want to win. And if there's no scoreboard, they don't know if they're winning. And I would guess that if you have frustration and fatigue among some of your team members, a reason might be that they're actually winning and they don't know it. So if you can create a job profile where you say, hey, this is a win. If you can do these things here, you are going to love life and make a bunch of money. If you don't do these things, it's going to be tough. We're going to have some difficult conversations. But this provides the scoreboard of what is expected of me and am I able to rise to the occasion. A written job profile is absolutely, absolutely critical. I'm going to go through just little bits of this, and we'll go through it in detail later. So in our written profile, we've got schedule expectations. So we lay out 3 bullet points. What are our expectations of how they come to work based on our schedule? We've got basic professionalism, and we've got 5 bullet points. What is basic professionalism, right? Here's an example. Come to work on time. That's basic professionalism. Here's another one. Look professional and clean cut, right? That's basic professionalism. Another one is we have design center responsibilities. We have a number of bullet points for what is expected in the design center. Lastly, we have key areas of responsibility, KRAs. And these are the critical expectations in a sales role of what is required for you to succeed in your job. So we go through this in the interview. We go through this during the onboarding process. We go through this during performance reviews, because this is the benchmark of what we expect from our team members. And I can't tell you how much this clarifies things. And I mean, look at this, like, is this intentional? You bet it's intentional, right? We've thought about, what do we want out of this team member? We've documented, if you can do this, 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 and this, we're going to have a great experience here. But this also gives you something to fall back on to measure performance. So I can think of a situation I had a number of years ago where I worked for a company and I was desperate for a performance review. I mean, I wanted to be held accountable. I felt like I was killing it and I was desperate for a performance review. And I asked my boss over and over and over to give me one. Finally, they agreed to. I go up that day to their office, open the door. It's super clear they forgot about it. They totally forgot about it. They're in the middle of doing something else. And I came in and said, you know, hey, I'm here. And they're like, yeah. And I said, we have a performance review right now. And they, oh yeah, yep, that's right. Yep, come on and sit down right here. And they literally said, yep, okay. What I'd like you to do, they basically handed me a blank piece of paper. And they said, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to fill this out and I'd like you to evaluate yourself on your performance. Total cop out. They had nothing planned. They forgot about it. So I like, how I thought I did, I handed it back to them. Their performance review was an emotional reaction to what I had written down. There was no data. There was no facts behind it. It was entirely emotional based on their stress level that morning, what they ate for breakfast, and responses that I had given. Don't do that because team members can smell that out. And how did that make me feel? Like, write this into the chat. How would that make you feel about the competency of that leader? And does that make you feel like that leader actually has a way to help you win? Does it actually feel like they care about you if that was your experience? I'd like you to write that into the chat. So you've got to be intentional. And it's amazing how when you are intentional that you're given the benefit of the doubt. If your team members think you know what you're doing, they'll follow you. But once team members start to feel like this person doesn't have a clue, they lose respect for you. They're not going to follow you, and it's going to be extremely difficult. Yeah, Ben put in disrespectful. Right on. Like, yeah, I felt totally disrespected. I felt like I was the one that had to come to you. I've been begging for this performance review. We had it in the calendar. You forgot about it. And now you've got no data and no factual basis for what you're telling me. Like, sorry, that was one of the steps in the process of me leaving the company, was that, like, I can't figure this out. Like if I don't feel like as the leader, you have the competency to take me anywhere, then I'm going to go find somewhere else that can. So it's really important that we understand this stuff. And do you guys want me to? You can punch this into the chat. Do you want me to go through this job profile? Would that be helpful for you? Would that be helpful for you? Type in yes, and if not, we'll keep moving, and we'll go to something else. Okay. So you got to be intentional. Intentional companies win. Part 2. Okay, Ben said yes. We'll go back to this in just one second. Okay, you got to remember that slow is fast. If you guys have ever listened to my podcast, we say this every single week. Slow is fast. And what you got to realize is that on the front end, when it comes to training, if you go slow and steady, you'll be amazed at how fast that team member can run on the back end. So to give an example of slow is fast, this is on day 1, you just talk to them about your company. You don't get into products. You just talk to them about expectations. You know, week number 1, they're not learning about fireplaces. They're spending all their time learning about, what does winning look like in this role? What does losing look like? What are the expectations? What do the different people in the company do? Then we move on, right? Go slow on the front end to go fast on the back end. Because the opposite of that is fast is slow. If you have a fast is slow approach, right? Say that you have someone with industry experience. So you hire them and you say, perfect, you know, you've done fireplaces before. You put them in the truck with Jimmy. That's fast is slow, because Jimmy's going to teach them all kinds of bad habits. They're going to learn all of Jimmy's baggage. And they think they understand how to do fireplaces because they've got industry experience, but you haven't formed them into the image of the team member you want. And so 6 months down the road, when they've got bad habits, when they're burned out, or when they leave you for $1 more an hour somewhere, you're frustrated, and it's slow. So you go slow on the front end so you can go fast on the back end. And I will say, this example of this team member that I've got that, you know, hired in September, all these sales by the time December, January roll around, we still took a slow is fast approach. 6 weeks, they were not on the sales floor. 6 weeks, they're learning about the company, They're learning very, very, very basic concepts about different things. We opened up the lanes for them where they were only allowed to sell gas inserts where gas line was already in the fireplace. That was it. If it was a wood stove, a pellet unit, if there was gas line, it went to another team member. So that was going slow. But by going slow on the front end, we were able to start to run much faster on the back end, okay? So I'll go over this real quick. Here's our example of our job profile. This is for a salesperson. Okay, schedule expectations. Be available to work Monday through Saturday according to the monthly schedule, 35 to 50 hours a week, depending on the season. Commitment to work 2 to 3 Saturdays per month, depending on the season. Turn in requested time 1 week before the monthly schedule is made. Okay, think about what that intentionality does. We've just laid the groundwork that you do need to work these potential days, and it's going to be between 35 to 50 hours a week, depending on the season. So if you get in season and they work 50 hours in a week and they say you're working me too much, you can fall back to this and say, well, I understand that you don't like that. This is what the position requires. Do you think that this is the right position for you? Or are there other things we can do to give you more free time, whatever it looks like? But this has set the expectation, right? Commitment to working 2 to 3 Saturdays per month. This is what the job requires. So without this, if you just start scheduling this team member for Saturdays and they're sitting there getting burned out because you never set the expectation that this is what's required. We all want to know what's expected of us. Turn in requested time 1 week before the monthly schedule is made. Next category, basic professionalism. Come to work on time. Look professional and clean cut. Communicate well with customers and help them with their needs. Work well with other team members. Display a positive mental attitude, even in difficult situations. And you might be listening to this being like, come on, they should know, come to work on time. You're going to make me tell the team member to come to work on time? Yes, I am. Because you have to communicate expectations. And there's sometimes an old school mentality of like, hey, I just know this stuff. Guess what? Your new hires don't. Be super, super clear. It makes life so much better for everybody. So even though it's redundant, this reinforces what the team member can do to win. And if the team member shows up looking clean cut and professional, tell them that they're winning. Hey, nice job, Tim. You look so good today. I love the way that you dressed. Your customers are going to love you. You know, whatever it is. Same thing when you go to performance reviews. Bring out this and just talk about, hey, you've been doing so good coming to work on time. I love that. And we just really appreciate it. It lets them know that they're winning. Design center responsibilities. Know the sales philosophy and the sales process used in the showroom. Okay, now if they're not using your sales process, you've got something to talk about. Utilize the greeting and retail selection form to understand the customer's needs and smoothly transition them into a quote or a sale. Use the builder selection form to capture client information and send to the appropriate builder sales representative. Understand our vendors and our company. Keep showroom brochures stocked, floors vacuumed, units dusted, and bathrooms clean. Work with the inside sales administrator to preview jobs and close on them, right? In the design center, these are the things that we need you to do. And now here's the KRAs, the key areas of responsibility. And we actually have a scoreboard on this. Keep an updated CRM of all jobs. Be aware of monthly and quarterly sales goals and your current progress towards them. Participate in retail sales meetings, qualify for sales bonuses every month, and stay current on units, technology, and competition. That lays such a groundwork, right? And we're telling them in the interview, we're telling them during the onboarding, a required part of this job, you to qualify for sales bonuses. That's awesome. Like, if you're not qualifying for bonuses, it means that you're not doing good. So the team member's sitting there being like, all right, like they want to pay me. This company doesn't want me to not qualify for bonuses. Like, this really helps. And so an example that I'll give is the idea that I was in Fort Worth, Texas a while back. And if you've heard me tell the story before, I apologize, but I think it's really important. So I was in Fort Worth, Texas a while back, and I'm there for a sales workshop. We have kind of a cocktail hour the first night. And I go out with a new friend I'd made from Iowa. And we're having a conversation about compensation structures. I know that that's not what this course is about. But one of my team members was onboarded very, very well, immensely loyal to the company, just great team player. And this team member happened to be paid in a commission. And so we're having this conversation in Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm arguing with this guy. It's a friendly argument. We're arguing about what compensation structure is best, a flat rate or being paid on performance. And I am adamantly arguing being paid on performance is way better than a flat rate. It's better for everybody. And he says, no, a commission is going to make them just sell stuff that's not in the customer's best interest. And I'm like, no, it's not true. Anyway, so we're talking about this. And I said, well, let's do this. I was like, you could call one of my team members right now. And again, like it's like 11 o'clock at night in Texas. Maybe it's even midnight. So it's like 10 o'clock back where I live in Portland. And I said, we can call one of my team members right now. They could tell you what their sales goal is for the month, where they're at right now, month to date, and where they're going to finish at. And he's like, do it. So literally at the bar, I pulled up on my phone. I called this team member. I put it on speakerphone. It's like 9, 10 o'clock at night. My team member picks it up. Hey, man, how's it going? My friend jumps right in, doesn't even let me get a word in. And he goes, hey, my name is such and such, and I'm here with Tim. Can you tell me right now what's your sales goal for the month? My team member off the top of his head just spits it out. And then I jump in and I said, and where are you at right now, month to date? Boom. He knows exactly where he is month to date. The other person's like, all right, and where are you going to finish the month at? He knew it off the top of his head because we had trained him that way through our intentional process. So it's just an example that this stuff really can work. Okay. Create a plan. It's super important to create a plan. If you give your new hires a path, they will follow it. If you don't give them a path, someone else will, and you may not like where it leads. It could be a team member that leads them down a path towards bitterness and resentment for you. Or it could be another company. It could be another company, a competitor, a different industry that actually shows your team member they've got a better plan than you. So you better jump on a plan to help this team member. One thing I'm going to show here. So I showed you the job profile. That's very important. This is something I can send out to the group. It's hard to see on the screen, but what I've got is I've got the first 30 days that a team member is on my team scripted out like to the T. I joke around that in the first 30 days, they're going to feel like even their bathroom breaks are scripted. But you can kind of see here, I'll hold it up to the screen and I can email this out, okay? Day one, we can see all these different things that we're doing, right? Like 9:30 to 10, we're doing this. 2:30 to 3, we're doing this. We've got that for the first 30 calendar days that team member's with the company. So when they show up on day one, they've got a binder on their desk with this printed out. They've got forms and flyers about the organizational chart of the company. Who does what? What's expected of their role? An example of a sales team scoreboard along with this. And their name is on the front of the binder. I've had team members, I guess I'll back up. When you create a plan, they assume you know where you're going. They assume it. They have no reason not to. I had a team member that was hired a number of years ago, and he looked at this, and literally on day one, he's like, in 54 years on this earth, I have never had a company do this for me. It makes a big difference in winning credibility. And it's like a love bank in a marriage, right? Like in a marriage, you got to make deposits into the love bank because there's going to be withdrawals that take stuff out. You got to make sure that you got enough in the bank for the check to clear. Same analogy with team members. These initial deposits will be so valuable when they start making withdrawals later. And making this initial deep dive of investment in your team members will set you up for them to give you credibility even in the face of difficulty. So you got to make a plan. It's so important that you do that. And we'll spend some time on this a little bit later. Next is going to be inspect often. So part of my first 30 days is you're going to see on this, there are all kinds of checkpoints. If you expect it, you must inspect it, right? If you want a team member to be competent on being able to sell this product line, you need to test it. They need to sell that product line to you. And you got to have a benchmark of what's success and what's failure. So for us on day one, we'll get into this a little bit later. We've got, the initial day, we got paperwork, we got tour and introductions, we got all these different things. At the end of the day, the test for the day is can that team member execute the open and close process in the showroom? Guess what? The open and close process isn't that hard. Unlock the door, turn on the lights, make sure that the fireplaces are dusted, right? Like we have a checklist that we go through. And at the end of the day, we test them. Can you open and can you close the store? And if they pass the test, amazing. We move on to step 2, right? On day 2, I'm going to look at this right here. Okay. Day 2, we're going to spend time going through how we track our door swings in the showroom. We're going to go through the way that we greet customers. We're going to talk about the philosophy and the general sales process that we have. The test on day 2, what is the sales process? We have 7 steps of our sales process. It's really easy. Step 1, greet the customer. Step 2, understand their problem. Step 3, advise a solution. Step 4, make a plan. Step 6, call to action. Step 5, call to action. Step 6, follow up. And step 7, show gratitude. Can they repeat that? Can they, we spend all day going through it. Can they repeat the 7 steps of the sales process? You've got to inspect this stuff often, especially if you've got installers and service techs. It is absolutely vital. Okay, any questions on this before we move on to what's next? Go ahead and punch them into the chat, and I'll wait just a minute before we keep going. Okay, so in the first 30 days, we just covered the fact you need to have a playbook. I would highly advise doing what I did, and I'll send this out to the group, but you need to have the first 30 calendar days scripted. So, in a month, that's probably 24 working days, maybe 25 working days, depending on the month. But every single day, you need to be intentional. Think about, on day 1, what do I want them to do? On day 2, what do I want them to do? On day 3, what team member do they look at here? What team member do they look at here? Be super intentional scripting it out. It is hard, painstaking work, but you'll never have to do it again. It's just going to be minor tweaks from there. We're going to move on now to the first 90 days, okay? So really quick, we got a question here from Carolyn. How do you suggest people with small teams implement this successfully? Great question. And let me know if this answers it, Carolyn. So I guess I'd back up and I'd ask how small the team is, but I'll give you an example of a company that I used to work in. The company was about 7 people. I would say whoever the new team member is going to be reporting to bears the weight of this. And it might mean that if you're going to bring on a new team member and you literally have no one else, that your next month is gone. Your next month is gone. It's going to be spent with that team member. I had situations like that. In my first few hires that were made, my month was gone because I was onboarding a team member and I had to find extra hours and times of the day, waking up early, staying up late to get the necessary tasks for me done. But I'm telling you, it was worth it because we were able to invest in that team member. In a small team, I think it's whoever they're reporting to bears the weight of that responsibility. The beauty is if you can make this framework, and so when it comes to onboarding, so let's say a salesperson, a big part of the onboarding is them spending a day in the warehouse. A big part of it is them going out 5-6 times with the installers. A big part of it is them going out to secret shop competition. So while it is time intensive on your end, there's also going to be focused tasks you can offload to other people, assuming that you're not an installer. You could have somebody else go help them in that area, but there's no way around it. If they're a direct report, this will be a high time investment. Okay, right here. So we have 12 staff, including the owner, but only 5 office sales. Okay, perfect. That's actually a pretty good sized company for our industry. And I guess what I would say is I would just delegate. I put the weight of responsibility on whoever their manager is going to be, but I would use other people on those teams to help flesh it out. And I'll run through part of this real quick just to give you guys a little more context, okay? So for us, like day 1, we're going through paperwork, introductions, the company story, the organizational chart explanation. We're focusing on giving them context to the way that we work, right? We're inviting them into a story, and we want to show them that we can help them win, that they're coming into the right story. Day 2, we're jumping into the way that we do a customer greeting. We're talking about how do we conceptually work on sales process. We'll give them a couple hours of some online training, have them listen to podcasts, read articles, that sort of thing. Throughout the first 30 days, we're going to teach them how to, punch into the time clock. How do they apply for vacation? How do we answer emails? What's an email signature? How do we manage our inbox? Day 4, we'll have them go out with a team member who's just going into customers' homes just to observe. How do we treat customers in their homes? How do we do that? How do we capture a scope of work? Day 5, competitive shopping. We give them a list of competitors. I give them like 5 competitors to go to. They have a 1-page form for every single one. They got to fill out. What's the parking lot like? How was I greeted? Did they offer me a quote? Did their solution look like it would solve my problems? We send team members out to do that stuff. So it is time intensive, but there is going to be some of this that it's not going to be just on you to do. And especially once you build this, you'll be able to delegate certain parts of it. Let me know if that answers your question, but I think that it's really important to discuss that. Okay, so things to implement in the first 90 days. I would say your first 30 days is an absolute deep dive on the basic responsibilities of the job. If they get product knowledge during that time, great. But that's not the purpose of the first 30 days. They need to understand the company. They need to believe that you can help them win, and they need to understand what is expected of them. That's the first 30 days. And you need to script that out tight, like script it out. Again, bathroom breaks, lunch breaks, like keep it tight. The first 90 days, I let team members know once that first month is over, I say, hey, just so you know, we've seen a lot of each other in these first 30 days. We're never actually going to spend that much time together again. We're now opening it up a little bit. Where in the first 90 days, the remaining part of the first 90 days, here's what we want you to accomplish, but you're going to start to get more freedom. With that, in the first 90 days, number one, your goal is you got to set the company bar. So that means I'm assuming, I pray to God that your company has regular team meetings. If you don't, you need to start. But set the company bar, right? Do the people in your company actually have a process to what they do? Do they enjoy working there? Are you an intentional leader that cares about your team members? These first 90 days are so instrumental. You've got to set the company bar high. If they're just talking to Joe in the truck with no accountability, no plan, I mean, the bar is set so low, like they're going to be the lowest common denominator. You've got to set that bar super, super high. Next, in the first 90 days, you have to show a team member how they can win. I'm a big fan of the company Chick-fil-A. Maybe you've heard of them. They're kind of a big deal. But I was at a seminar where someone from Chick-fil-A was talking, and he said that every new team member that comes on board is looking for three things. They want to know that the company has purpose. Why do you exist? Do you exist just to put money in the owner's pocket? You're probably not going to have employees that are that motivated, right? Is there a bigger purpose that you exist for? Your team members want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So is there a purpose? They say, does it pay well, right? So does it pay well? Third, is there a plan for their success, right? Those things are showing a team member that you can help them win. In a sales role, one of the things that I do a lot in the first 90 days, we spend a lot of time talking about reporting, margins, and numbers. So I am very transparent. When someone gets hired, I will pull out sales numbers of other team members over the last 7 years, 5 years, and I'll say, hey, here's the sales goals that we have for you this year. Now, here's what this team member did in their first year, and I'll send that to them. Here's what this team member did in their first year. Here's the best team member in their first year we've ever had. Here's the worst team member we've ever had. And the new hire, they know the commission structure, so they can figure out the math on this. But then I'll start to show them, hey, here's what year twos look like for this team member. Here's what year threes looked like. Look at what this person's doing right now. And that makes the new hire think, man, they can help me win, right? So one of my team members, young guy when he got hired, about 24 years old, and every single year his sales just went like this. So like year one, about 350,000. Year two, 700,000. Year three, 850. Year four, over $1 million. Single salesperson. I mean, by the time this guy's selling $1 million, he's like 26 years old, right? He's making a lot of money in commission, doing better than all of his friends that went to college and are crippled with debt. Like, it's a good situation for him. So part of it was the way that he was onboarded is I just showed him sales numbers of here, this is what we do. And we have different compensation plans that we're very honest with our team members about, that we're going to start you out here. If you show that you can move the needle in your sales, we can move you to this compensation plan. So team members get excited. Like, they see other people who have won. They know that there's a path for them, and they truly believe that we are invested to help them win. As a leader, you actually need to care more about your team members than your customers. I'll say it again. You as a leader must care more about your team members than your customers, because you as a leader do not serve your customers, you serve your team members, and your team members serve your customers. So if you don't throw everything into removing roadblocks, helping coach your team members, showing them that you are invested in their success, what on earth do they have to pour out to their customers? If you're not pouring in to them, is it any wonder that they're not pouring out into their customers, okay? So you've got to show that you can help them win. By all means, put in comments if you have any comments about that, because I know that that can be a sticky point. Number 3, set radically clear expectations, like radically clear. And this goes back to what I showed you on the job profile. If you expect it done, document it and talk about it. is you start to bring people back from layoffs and furloughs. I would go through a new onboarding process. I would lay out their job expectations, let them know that in this position, this is what we expect. We're going to measure it this way. If you can do these things, you will win and life is going to be amazing. But if you don't set expectations, you're going to find that team members get burned out, they develop bad habits, and they eventually leave your company because of lack of expectations. As I work with businesses, I find everything comes down to expectations. Everything does. Virtually any problem, any situation. If I'm in a business where the owners are older, they're desperate to get out and they have no way to do it, they have no one to hire, I guarantee it comes down to they've never set expectations. Because they've never set expectations, no one's risen to the occasion. And this is the spot that they're in. So we have to start there. I have a really good friend that tells this story sometimes. He called me one day. He was so frustrated at one of his service techs. This guy had been there for a long time, supposed to be a leader in the company, and they were a bad apple. They were poisoning other people. And this person called me so frustrated, on the verge of firing him. And I listened, and I just said, well, what do you expect out of them? And my buddy totally stopped. He's like, I don't know. Guess I've never told him. He went back and created a checklist of expectations. He went back to that person, literally 3 months later, is one of his best employees. So that's an example. Like I told you, hard clay doesn't get soft again. Well, I guess sometimes it does. But the truth is that he was able to turn the tide just by setting expectations. In a marriage relationship, right? We talked about this in Marriage Counseling 101. What are the unsaid roles and expectations that you have of the other person in the marriage? Because if you don't get that stuff out on the table, it's going to be a terrible relationship. We all want to know what's expected of us. So be super, super clear. Give them a framework for success. Extremely important. And that goes back to on the iPad here, right? So when I give them a job profile, that's a framework for success. When they've got a binder with their first 30 days scripted out, that's a framework for success. They understand, okay, if I do these things, I'm going to win, right? If they're an installer, give them a checklist of what is a signature installation. How do we do this? How do we greet a customer the right way? We have a 7-step sales process. Again, I talked about it. Step 1, greet the customer. Step 2, understand their problem. Go down the list. And we tell our team members, the reason that we give you this is because it works. It works. I can show you sales records of team members that have sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over the last few years using this model. And if you can use it too, you're going to find that you win. If you fight against the framework, it's going to be really difficult. But again, team members are in a new situation. So they're desperate for a framework, right? If you give it to them, they will follow it and they will succeed. I've talked before about creating a weekly game plan for team members, where team members have a weekly form that they fill out of how am I going to attack my week? What am I going to go after? And they can turn it into their manager and they can check in at the end of the week to see how it went. That's a framework for success. I've had team members tell me, if you took away my weekly game plan, I'd be done. I couldn't sell as much. I'd forget to call people back, but you've given me a framework to help me win. And I'll tell you, I've made huge mistakes with this. I've made huge mistakes of not giving people frameworks. And for me, I'm not a rules guy. I'm a guidelines guy. I'm fine with rules, but a lot of the times I find ways to break them. I want guidelines. Let me know when I'm too far off the rails here. Let me know when I'm too far off the rails here, and I'll figure it out. It's not the way all of your team members are. I have made huge mistakes by team members that think much more black and white. They want a box. And if they want a box, give them a box. Even if they're like me, where they want guidelines, not rules, you can still give them a framework. So think about our sales process. Step 1, greet the customer. Does it make sense that before you show a customer a fireplace, you should probably greet them? I think we can all agree on that, right? But how you greet the customer, well, you got freedom, right? But I'm just telling you that it makes sense to greet the customer before we show them anything, right? Okay, step 2 of our sales process is understand their problem. Doesn't it make sense that before we start showing them something, that we understand what they need, right? Wouldn't it make sense if you go to the doctor, they don't just start wheeling you into surgery, they actually sit down with you to diagnose the condition first? That's not micromanagement. It's giving a framework. If a team member needs more black and white lines, that the framework allows you to fine tune it specific to them. But in every situation that your team members have, give them a framework. This is how we do sales. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. This is how we apply for vacation. This is how we manage our inbox. Give them frameworks everywhere, and it will change the way your business is run. Step 5, show them the tools that are in their toolbox. If you hired an installer, show them the tools that are in their toolbox. Literally, they need to understand what those are. For a salesperson, for us, we have an easy pricing guide that we have set up that can create very quick estimates. It shows margin levels of the products that we sell, and it shows the different discount levels that customers have based on their context, right? If they're a repeat customer, they get this discount on this product. If they're a builder client, they get this. If we're matching a competitive quote, here's where we can go to. That's a tool in the toolbox so that a salesperson actually has what they need to succeed. And that's a time machine too, because if you don't give that to them, they're going to come to you for everything. Give them tools in the toolbox. A tool for us is that for years we had a metric where a team member could log into a dashboard. They could see their sales goal and their progress for the month. Like, it's an amazing tool in the toolbox, right? A tool in the toolbox could be just simply showing them how the brochures work. What brochures cover what things? Everybody has tools that are going to help them succeed in their job. And as the leader, you've got to be very, very clear in showing them what's going to help them win. If they're going out to a customer's house, there's an iPad app that we would use called My Measures. Unbelievable app for capturing job information on the initial bid out at the house. So we show them how to use it, right? Like, this is how you use the iPad. This is how you save this file. This is how you document your notes. This is how you fill out the preview form. Show them the tools that are in their toolbox. Every single person needs that. Justin says he loves that app. Justin, you're the man for using it. It's a game changer. Everybody here needs to go download My Measures. It's awesome. Okay. Number 6, use this time to mold them into your image. Use this time to mold them into your image. This is so important. You have to mold them. They are a rough block of marble, and you're trying to make the statue of David. That doesn't happen by accident, right? If you got a block of marble and you just leave it outside for 10,000 years, it's going to get the wind beat on it. It's going to get rocks that are knocking against it. That thing will never become the statue of David. But you as a leader, you can sculpt, you can mold. In this first 90 days, be radically intentional to show them the type of team member you want them to become. I would advise that you have regular meetings. So, like, honestly, in companies, here's the rhythm of meetings you got to have. Daily install meetings, daily. 15 minutes long, stand-up meeting, daily, has to happen. If you're a smaller company that install and service are together, install and service, that same meeting. It's got to happen daily. Sales meeting. I'd recommend every week. If you need to, you can go every other week. You have to have a meeting with the salespeople about what's going on in the showroom, about their progress towards the goals, what they're going to do for the week, and then live sales practice. In addition to that, you need to do an all-company meeting probably once a month. Maybe you could stretch it a little bit further, but I would highly advise once a month. In addition to that, you need to have a coaching meeting with anyone who is a direct report in your team once a month outside of the office. Anybody that reports to you. So if you're the leader in the company, this might be 6 meetings a month. I mean, if you're a leader in the company, you've got to schedule this where you go to a Starbucks, you go to wherever, and it's a meeting that's like 30 minutes to an hour long where you are just molding into coaching, right? Like, what can I do to help you win? What roadblocks are you encountering that I can help you with? What are your goals right now? I could tell story after story about times I've had team members that eventually leave my company. But because of our coaching meetings, I got an extra 6-7 months out of them. And we were able to onboard someone, get them in the position and set everybody up for success because we had regular meetings. And I've had team members that, you know, I had a guy, I've told the story before, that I had a guy who wanted to become a computer programmer. And we're having a meeting one day and I'm asking how things are going. And he just tells me, you know, hey, I've been thinking about this and there's this internship program where it could be a really good opportunity for me. And I just said, yeah, that would be an awesome opportunity for you. I can totally see that you're made for it. Like, you love computers, you're super good with them. Why don't you go for it? Let me know what comes of it. So he gets into this internship program a little while later and we're able to adjust. We pull back his working hours. We start talking about what's going to be needed to replace him. It took 6 to 7 months after that team member eventually left. But before they asked for my blessing. Like, I gave them the blessing to go do that. And if you don't have regular meetings with your team, they don't think you're invested. I can't guarantee that this means people won't leave your company. What I can guarantee is that you have the best chance possible for them not to. And when they do, it's probably going to be with your blessing. So use this time to mold them into your image. And you might say, well, that's a lot of work. Okay, so if you're a small company, that means that every day I got to be with the installers for 15 minutes. That means that every week I've got to be with the sales team for an hour. That means that every month I have to have a coaching meeting with every team member that reports to me and with the whole company. Yes, that's what being a leader is. Being a leader is not running parts out to a job site when something's missing. Being a leader is not solving everybody else's problem. Being a leader is working with your team so they can go out and crush it. That's what it is. And so many people in our industry are so busy spinning their own tires that they have no time to invest in other people. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is it any wonder that they're always stressed, they're always burned out, and they can't keep anybody in their positions? So I know this is a big change, but it is absolutely critical. Those first 90 days, use this time to mold them into your image. Lastly, treat it as unique and special. I'm very honest with team members when they come on board. As I just talk about, like, you know, this 90 days, it's going to be special. It's going to be unique. This is something that it's never going to happen again, that we're going to spend this much time together. And our goal in this first 90 days, we want to help you win. We want you to understand the ins and outs of what's required of you. We want you to feel like you made the right decision, that this company is here to help you succeed. And you got to treat this time as special. If you just blow it off and after they've been there for a month, you just kick them to the curb and let them figure it out for themselves, they're going to get all kinds of bad habits. Now, I've heard people say, like, well, Tim, you're babying them. If you throw them to the wolves, the cream is going to rise to the top. And I'll agree, it will. But find that most of your hires don't work out. Most of the people that do rise to the top probably have some bad habits along the way. They might get you results, but you're going to have management fatigue on the back end. And a lot of the team members that got burned out and quit or left, they could have actually been really productive for you. But you didn't treat this time as unique and special. So in your first 90 days, it is absolutely paramount that you do this. A while back, a situation where team members, I was managing stores in Portland and Seattle. We had some of the Seattle team of new hires down in Portland for some training. And we went to Topgolf after work. If you guys have Topgolf in the Midwest. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. Yeah, you guys have Topgolf out there. I've been to Topgolfs out in the Midwest. So we go to Topgolf and we're hitting golf balls talking. And there's probably 10 of us there. There's 2 or 3 new hires from Washington. And then there's like 6 or 7 of us from Oregon. One of the coolest things is I'm sitting with one of the new hires from Washington. They've only been there for like 2 weeks. And I'm talking to them and saying, hey, look at this team member. You know what's so awesome to see? This is how they used to approach sales. Now they've been able to transform their sales game. This was the number that they sold last year, and they were able to pay off their truck. This person's getting ready to buy a house. Like I was able to say, like, it has been the best thing in the world as a leader to see the success of these salespeople. It's been the best thing in the world to see these salespeople sell more than I ever did in retail. We can do the same thing for you. You know, we're treating this time as unique and special. We're making the deep dive on the front end so that team members can run and ultimately win on the back end. In the first 90 days, we have to treat this as special, and you're going to knock it out of the park. Okay. With this, I want to jump into the ultimate day one blueprint, and then I want to jump into questions, okay? I'm going to move my camera so I can see this. The ultimate day one blueprint is this. Number one, on day one, you go over paperwork. So when a new hire comes on board, there's always paperwork. Knock that out first thing in the morning. And on day one, like, this is probably going to be 100% of your day, right? Then go through tour and introductions. Whether your company is 5 people, 12 people, or 50 people, after the paperwork, give them a tour. Hey, this is our showroom. This is the accounting office. This is the break room. This is the warehouse. Hey, this is Cindy. She works on the sales team and she just kills it. Cindy, you know, she loves golden retrievers. This is Mike. He's our accountant. Go through all of this, tour and introductions. After that, you want to jump into the company's story and the organizational chart. So before you're talking about anything with their job, who is this company they got hired with, right? You've got the ability to craft that story. Now, your company story, while it is informing them about the company, what your story needs to do is it needs to show them how they can win. So you're explaining, this is the history of what we do. This is why we do what we do, so that we can help our customers win, so that we can help our team members win. Spend time on the story and then go through the organizational chart. Even if your company is 5 people, you have an org chart. This person does this. They're the owner of the business. These are their areas of responsibility. This person's our accountant. They have this part-time accountant underneath them. These are the things that they do. Here's the head salesperson. Here's our service tech. Whatever it is, go through that organizational chart in detail. Give the team member a copy of it so that they can refer to it when they need questions answered. It's going to be important that someone who comes on board understands how the company works, and they can use the company as an extension of themselves. They can't do that if they don't understand the org chart. And even though it sounds simple, I've been in jobs where it's taken me 1.5 years, 2 years to understand the org chart. So get this out of the way quickly. Next, job expectations, KRAs, and the scoreboard. So job expectations, that's going to go to the form right here of the retail job profile, right? What does basic professionalism look like? What are the manager expectations of this? What are the design center responsibilities? Go through that in detail. KRAs, key areas of responsibility. As a salesperson, here are the 4 key areas of responsibility that you have. As an installer, here are the 4 key areas of responsibility that you have. And lastly, show them the scoreboard. This isn't a class on scoreboards. Maybe we'll do one sometime. Every business needs scoreboards for every department. Sales, installation, service, office staff. There are metrics that must be tracked, and they need to be put up on a public scoreboard for everyone in the company to see. Now, you can decide with margin information and things like that what is specific to teams, but there needs to be general scoreboards that show public performance for every team member. And it needs to line up with their KRAs, right? If you expect a key area of responsibility to be that they hit their sales goal every month, you need to post publicly, have they hit their sales goal? How is that in relationship to other team members? And you will find that this motivates people like nothing else. We had a WWE heavyweight title belt. It was like a kid's toy that we gave to the salesperson with the highest numbers for the month. No money tied to it, just bragging rights. You would not believe how people anticipated the scoreboard. They wanted the scoreboard to come out because they're sitting there bragging to each other about, I'm going to get the belt this month. So you have to have a scoreboard. Next is going to be your team's philosophy. Understand the why. If any of you guys are fans of reading, you have to read the book by Simon Sinek. Start with why. It will change your life. The team members got to know why. What's the philosophy of your sales process? How do you approach sales? Why is it important that we serve customers through sales? If you're an installer, why do we install jobs this way? Why do we do the things that we do? How is this different than competitors in our area who don't show the same attention to detail? We spend, no joke, like 2 hours on this. I've got like 17 pages written up on sales philosophy. We're not telling them how to sell. We're saying this is why we sell. This is why we sell. This is the approach that we take. This is what good listening is. This is what bad listening is. So go over your team's philosophy. After that, on day 1, lunch with the boss, right? So I joke around. I say like, hey, you're going to be stuck with me all day, right? Get in my car. I'm taking you to lunch. Go out to lunch on day 1 with them. Get to know them. Find out what they like to do outside of work. Share your life. Share your story. Make that investment. Again, you're putting bricks in the wall of goodwill that you're building up, and they truly are going to believe that you can help them win. Okay, get back from lunch. Tackle the administrative basics. The phone system, introduction, the company login, email signature. How do I clock in? How do I apply for vacation time, right? Like just basic administrative stuff that they have to understand. Go through all that after lunch. Then tackle bedrock responsibilities, like bedrock. So if you're a salesperson, I got open and close process, right? As a salesperson, we've got to open and close the store. How do we do that? Okay. If you're an installer, how do we protect the floors going onto a job site? That's just bedrock responsibility. It's not rocket science. They have to know it. In the office side, how do we greet customers over the phone? Just teach them those bedrock responsibilities that they could put to work tomorrow. Okay. After that, I'd recommend 2 hours of online video content. This is a busy day. I mean, this is a busy day with a lot of things you're cramming into it. Give them the last 2 hours of the day with online video content, whether it's a TED Talk, whether it's someone from your team talking about sales. The Fire Time Network is something that we've discussed. It has all kinds of courses that you can take to grow team members. We give them 2 hours of online video content, and at the very end of the day, give them a test on their bedrock responsibilities. Make sure they can pass that test. We haven't talked about this yet, but one thing that I would do that's been really, really cool is we would not give someone business cards or a company cell phone or company apparel until they passed every test in the first 30 days. The reward on day 30 was they got to go out to breakfast or lunch with the owner of the company, and they got their company business cards, they got their cell phone, they got their apparel. So find ways to create benchmarks. You're helping your team members win. Okay, we got a comment here from Justin, and he says, another app I use is called Fast Field. We created our own app that helps us to track jobs and sales goals, etc. It can be molded to each individual company. It's terrific. I'm not familiar with that app, but I'll have to check it out. If you're using it that way, man, that's awesome. So more power to you for doing that. This is a quote right here from Stephen Covey. I mentioned him before. He is the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he says this, and I guess I'll give some context here. So people listening to this might think this is a lot of work. You're telling me when I hire someone for my warehouse, I got to go through this? Yes. Sorry, you do. You got to show intentionality. Again, if you build the framework once, you'll be able to slightly tweak it down the road, or you can give it to someone else on your team and say, hey, can you build this out for the warehouse person? Okay, you've got to do it. So many people are like, I'm not going to make that investment, right? They're just sweeping my parking lot. I'm not going to make that investment. They're just an install helper. I mean, it's like, well, what do you think you're going to get out of them if you don't make that investment? Stephen Covey says, treat a man as he is, and he will remain as he is. But treat a man as he can and should be, and he will become as he can and should be. Right? I mean, that quote, it's a male-dominated quote. It's true for females too, right? Treat a person as they should be, and they will become as they should be. Anyone with kids knows this, right? What do you say to your kids all the time, right? Like, I've got a 4-year-old daughter, a 1.5-year-old son, and I'm always talking to them about, you are such a good listener. Olivia, look at the woman that you're becoming. You obey your parents. Look at how kind you were here, right? Like, is she always a good listener? No. But how do I treat her as she should be? And guess what? Kids will become that way. Your team members will too. If you say, well, I'm not going to do that, I don't respect this person, is it any wonder that they act that way? You treat them like crap, right? If you treat them as they should be, they will become as they should be. And if you lay out clear expectations, you've got a metric where if they truly cannot rise to the occasion, you can have a conversation about them working elsewhere. But you'll be amazed when you treat people as they should be, how they rise to the occasion. Carolyn said, powerful quote. Awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad that resonates. Okay. So guys, that's onboarding 101. If you can do these things, you will win. And I'll tell you, like, I have failed and I've succeeded at this. I failed in the sense that I've had team members that I've rushed too quickly into things. I've made assumptions that were not true. Those failures have made me realize that going slow on the front end helps you win on the back end. And if you can build this system, you're going to find that people love working for your company. You're able to train, you're able to fill positions you never thought you could fill, and you're going to look up in 2 years and think, man, this business is starting to run itself. So I want to thank you guys for your time. I am super excited for the rest of our webinars, and I'm going to be hanging around for a couple minutes if you guys have questions. And I'll say something super dangerous right now on this call. If everybody wants to unmute yourselves, please, let's talk about this. I'll be around for a few minutes. Just unmute yourself and fire away, and we can go through it. But I want to say thank you.
Thank
Carolyn,
you,
thank
Tim. I don't see anybody
Thank you.
unmuting themselves.
Awesome. Justin, so good. Don, thank you. I hope that helps.
Hey, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a resource for scoreboard examples?
I do. We can talk offline about it. I do. I've had a lot of scoreboards over the years on the sales end and in some other departments too. And I'm happy. Well, we'll talk about this now real quick. There's an amazing book, if you guys are readers, that's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It will change the way that you run your business. And 4DX is the acronym for it. Their principle of execution is this, is step 1, focus on the wildly important. So if it's not wildly important, don't have your team focus on it. So let's say that it's going to be a sales scoreboard. What is it truly that's wildly important? And that's what the scoreboard should have on it. Step 2 is focus on lead measures, not lag measures. So an example of a lead measure versus a lag measure would be if you're a salesperson, let's say you're a sales leader, and you want to track your installed margin for the month of October. Well, it's a great metric to track. The problem is you're not going to get that number till halfway through November. So by the time you find out how your margin did in October, it lags behind. You can't do anything about it. It doesn't mean the measurement doesn't matter, but it means that it cannot motivate any behavior towards moving the needle. So what you want to do is if the lag measure, which is, I want to raise my margin 4 points in October, if that's the lag measure, you got to think about what are the lead indicators that if I do these things in the here and now, they will move the needle on my margin. That's what you measure. So for example, we had a situation where we wanted to raise sales. Great. I can find out, say that I want to sell $100,000 for that month, whatever it is. That's a great metric, but again, I don't find out to the end of the month how I did. It can't really inspire behavior. So what we found as a lead indicator that actually went on our scoreboard was how many proposals did each team member write up that week. And we measured it against each other. So team members could see who was writing up the most proposals, because we're making the strategic bet that if we want to raise our top line sales, the more proposals we write up, the better we can do that. And we can measure that in the here and now. And that moves the needle on the lag measure. Does that make sense? The difference between the lead and the lag measure?
Yeah, it's like a sales funnel you're creating essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So what we do on our scoreboard is, the way that I lay out my scoreboards is I've got usually 3 metrics. At the very top, I will show the lag measure, right? And that's very often a wildly important goal. I want to, we want to have a team combined sales of this much this month, whatever it is. But then we'll have 2 lead measures. So like one of them might be the amount of proposals that were written up this week. The next lead measure might track how many follow-up calls each team member made in their CRM. Because we're making the strategic bet. If you write up more proposals and if you follow up with more customers, that will move the needle on this lag measure on top. So that's usually my scoreboard. 1 lag measure, 2 lead measures that correspond to it. There's some variations from there, but we can absolutely talk scoreboards offline. Yeah, my email address is right here if anyone wants to reach out to me on that. Justin said, you mentioned giving us your bullet points for the onboarding process. Yes, I will be putting those documents together and I will send them to Erica. So I'll get you a PDF, and you're gonna have to modify this, but I'll get you a PDF of my job profile and of the first 30 days. And again, you can script that out however you want.
Awesome.
Hey Tim, you had so that job description that you were going over looked like a single page?
Yeah.
So right now we use something that drastically needs edited for content, but because it's old and it just needs to be updated. But we have the employee handbook, which is a much larger piece of literature, for lack of a better term. But
yeah.
So you got your job description, and then do you also, when you're doing your onboarding process, do you also have something like that, a much larger employee handbook?
Yeah, and that goes back to day 1 where we talk about paperwork at the beginning of the day. Yeah, we go through all that. So both are valuable. If you're a bigger company that has an employee handbook, that's amazing. A lot of companies don't. But I think that Justin, thank you. We'll see you later. But I think that having a single page, just keep it simple, basic expectations, because that'll be something that you reference very frequently. Where the employee handbook, that's like the Bible, you're not going to reference that quite as much.
Okay, great. Thanks. Great presentation. Look forward to seeing more of these.
Cool. Thank you, guys.